Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. I am so excited today to have my old friend, Candace Nicolls, on the show with us today. She is someone who I have worked with, been admired in her work. She's the SVP, the Senior Vice President of People at SnagAJob.com. And I'm just so pleased that you were able to make some time to come in and share some of your hard-earned culture wisdom with my audience. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today. I love talking about this kind of thing, so I cannot wait to dive into this with you.
Awesome. Great. So just so we have a little bit of context, can you tell me a little bit, SnagAJob, I think, is not a household name. Tell me a little bit about what it is, or tell us a little about what it is and your kind of journey inside, because you've been with the company for a long time.
Yeah. So SnagAJob is the country's largest marketplace for hourly work. I think some people hear our name and think we're a staffing company, and we're not. We build technology solutions to bring hourly workers and hourly employers together in a way that's much more seamless, removes a lot of the friction. I think especially over the last few years, when we've all kind of realized that hourly workers are the backbone of our economy.
Right.
We really want to make sure the segment of the population is getting the attention that they deserve. And so that's a big reason why I joined SnagAJob 12 years ago. I really wanted to work for a company that was mission oriented. Helping people find work was something that was near and dear to my heart. I joined SnagAJob as a technical recruiter. And so being part of an organization whose entire mission was to help people find the right job for them was incredibly appealing. And frankly, one of the reasons I came to SnagAJob was not because I was looking to leave my last company, but because I wanted to work for SnagAJob because of the reputation the company culture had. We would see SnagAJob at corporate events, and everyone just looked like they were having a great time with each other. And then as I learned more and more about what the company did, I knew that that was something I wanted to be a part of.
So you've been there for 12 years. You started as a technical recruiter. Now you're Senior Vice President of People. You're one of the longest tenured people there. I think I'm making that a good assumption there. Was it, so you were aware of the culture? That was one of the reasons that you showed up. Is that did you become aware of the importance of culture? Was there a moment when you became aware of the importance of culture, whether it was before or after you joined SnagAJob? What was that moment? What kind of opened your eyes to that? Like, oh my gosh, this is a critical business skill. This is something that's really important.
It's such a great question. I think I really realized it at the company I was with prior to SnagAJob. It was the first company I worked at where people genuinely enjoyed working with each other, and that resulted in better business outcomes. And so I think what I started to see was that the environment that this company was fostering was actually making our work product better. And when I saw the mission of SnagAJob and then saw all of these components of culture that was then driving forward that mission, how people worked together, how proud they were of the work that they were doing, the camaraderie that they had together, I made the jump to there, not again because anything was wrong with my last company. I thought they were doing this really well, but having that then with a really compelling mission on top of that, seemed like the perfect fit for me. I've been here 12 years, so hopefully that says something.
Yeah, and so you've been at SnagAJob through a lot of changes, a lot of positive and a lot of challenging things that have happened. Can you talk us through a little bit about some of the arcs and some of the more, I think, culture is great when things are going well, right? I saw someone tweet when interest rates started increasing and tech started having challenges. Someone tweeted that turns out technology employees have learned that they have confused a good culture with a high stock price.
Oh, right? That's so interesting. Yeah, totally.
So for you, I think what I want to know is the moments of the challenging moments, whether it's a reduction in force or limiting budgets, or how have you coped with that and used and leaned into culture in order to manage some of those difficult times? Don't people just get pissed off and like culture goes out the window?
You
He
would think
asks leadingly.
so. Yeah, you would think so. I think for us, we have probably been 4 different companies in the time that I have been here. And when I look back at even just the last few years, I think it's a perfect example of, why culture has made a difference for us. Because if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I thought SnagAJob could be successful in a fully distributed team, I would have said absolutely not. We really relied upon that in-person connection. We have a 2-story slide in our physical office in Richmond,
Right.
Virginia. We do things like Office Olympics, it's all very centered around like being together. How does that then translate as we look to expand? And so we saw some of these kind of hiccups with company culture as we started to open different offices across the country. If someone was in one office, but the rest of their team was in another, were they getting the same kinds of information? And so when COVID hit, we really leaned into our mission. We leaned into our core values, which are solidarity, candor, unconvention, and fire. And I'll talk kind of about how those actually showed up for us when we were looking to make this change. We're also in the business of hourly work. So when you think about March of 2020, hourly work was shutting down. We saw millions of hourly workers displaced almost overnight. And so not only for us as a business do we have to contend with keeping our internal employees safe, we had to think about what was happening externally in the business. And so for us, we took a step back and thought, okay, like our company culture isn't us being in the same physical building. It's, okay, how are we making the best decisions for the business? That's solidarity. How are we being honest and transparent and communicating the right amount of information? That's candor. How are we just figuring things out that we have never had to solve before? That's unconvention. And how are we, doing it together to drive this mission forward? That's fire. And so I remember having a town hall on Thursday when everything was kind of shutting down as part of COVID. We had no idea what was going to happen. And we were like, you know what? Hashtag solidarity. We are in this together. Hashtag unconvention. We're just going to figure this out. We're going to try stuff along the way and see what works. And by leaning into that value of candor, after that, we were very, very transparent with the entire company. We communicated more than twice a week about what we were seeing in the marketplace, how we were pivoting the business to make sure we were adapting to take care of hourly workers who found themselves out of a job suddenly. How are we helping kind of essential employers find the workers that they needed? And so really leaning into what actually our culture actually was, that commitment to our mission and this kind of commitment to a shared set of behaviors that drove us to that mission. We were able to quickly, very quickly, more so than I would have expected, adapt and figure out how to do all of this online. Now, that being said, we are a tech company. The last couple of years have also raised some challenges for us. And so I think like a lot of technical companies, we were not immune to some of the market fluctuations in the past year. And so we did find ourselves in a position where we had to do a couple of rounds of layoffs. And so we went back to that set of core values to say, how do we make sure we're answering people's questions? We put together a list of kind of FAQs that we shared out with the company so people would know how we had to come to this decision. We pulled everybody together for an all hands. We encouraged people to bring their questions. And so even in December, we had to have a second round. Unfortunately, it was really, really important for us to talk about what we were changing in the business, to get people's input on how they could make things better, to give people time to process. And again, leaning on those values of like, we know we're in this together, and making those tough decisions in a company like ours is so incredibly hard because people here are very connected. Fast forward to 4 or 5 months from that, we just got our engagement survey results back, and our engagement scores are are above 75%. Again, I think because we're really leaning into those values and making sure people understand how we're making these decisions. Like, company culture isn't us all being in the same building. It's about trusting the message and aligning to make sure we're all moving in the same direction.
Now, when you're making these decisions, and you sort of called out, you're like hashtag solidarity, like every time that you are calling people together, you are, talking about a layoff, you are making hard decisions. Are you explicitly connecting those? Like, do you verbalize that to the values? And it's one thing if you're doing it, are other people doing it as well, other leaders?
Yeah, back when in the town hall that I mentioned around COVID, so going back to that one, we stood up in the company and we're like, hashtag solidarity, we're all in this together, like hashtag unconvention.
Yeah,
We're not sure what's gonna happen, but we're gonna figure it out. We
yeah,
weren't that explicit in the layoffs because it felt a little cheeky to do it in
yeah.
that way.
Okay.
But I think what we have found is that our leaders have demonstrated those values through their actions. And so people knew that we were going to give them transparent information. They knew that we were going to help them figure out
Mm,
the next steps going forward when it came into leaning to that unconvention. And I think having that genuine emotion and vulnerability from leadership too as part of this
yeah.
really helped. I mean, it was a difficult conversation, don't get me wrong, but I think people knew that we didn't take a decision like this lightly because we have built up trust over the years
Yeah.
through that kind of transparent series of communications.
When I'm hearing you talk about having to confront difficult moments, it sounds to me like one of the ways that you've done that is with your values, but it's not, yes, you're talking about them, but you've established an expectation maybe around how you can expect the organization to behave. And
Mhm.
that has set up kind of a conceptual framework or something for people to be able to articulate that. And so it feels more consistent or authentic. I don't know. I'm just kind of reading that. I'm just reflecting what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has made that so important was even again going back to the beginning of COVID, where we took a look at some of like the quote unquote rituals that were really important to Snag a Job. How do we make sure we've got our weekly kind of performance meetings that we're doing with the company, making sure we're continuing our monthly town halls that are more kind of recognition,
Mhm.
celebratory, keeping our weekly tech talks and engineering, all of those things, I think told the company this communication matters to us and we want you to know what's going on. And even
Mm.
when things got better after kind of that first wave of COVID, keeping those things up so people again understood how they had that message. And I think those rituals too are also what made it easier for us to make the transition from in person to virtual, because we were saying like, hey, we're going to keep this business continuity going through these things that we've already sort of established as important cultural markers for us.
Yeah.
And so actually really leaning into them when we weren't all physically together anymore, I think actually reinforced our company culture versus I think
Mm.
I have heard you reference it as like relationship decay.
Yeah.
And we didn't experience that because we kept some of those things that were really important. And we were also very intentional about leaning into what was working with even who we were hiring during that time, and making sure we
Mm.
revamped our interview process so people would have different connection points along the way. And even once people got onboarded, building those connection points. So they knew through all of this experience that they'd had with our regular communication channels that when we had to deliver bad news, we have given it a lot of thought. We were going to make sure that we were communicating it in a way that resonated with our previous communication style. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm giving very long answers
No, it's
today.
great. This is great. This is great. You have a unique position, I think, in your organization, in that as SVP of people, you are in touch with and understand and can connect with, know what's going on with the employees, from recent hires to veterans, but you also have exposure to the C-suite. And I think there's a lot of content out there about how to onboard employees, but the company has recently gone through some leadership changes, some executive changes. How have you, because I know culture is important to you, maybe, I don't know if it's blasphemous to say, but like onboarded new executives, new leadership into the culture? Because often they might come in and say, you've hired me because this is my way of doing things. What has that situation been like? Have you succeeded in the way that you wanted? And, if you have come up short, or where would you do it different maybe?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I would actually maybe even bring that back to some of our our entire interview process revamps that
Great.
we've done through positions across
Yeah.
the organization.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, my team and I really took a step back to make sure that our interview process was reflective of our company culture, because we are pretty unique and we wanted to make sure people knew what they were getting into right off the bat with us. So even starting at, what do we actually need this person to do? How do we truly define what this role, not what has always worked before, but what do we actually want this role to do? How do we then figure out the right kind of questions and panel to ask? We made sure we brought in cross-functional peers for every position. I interview everybody that we hire. We have our ERG leaders as an option for people to meet with as part of our interviews, including our new executives. They were offered this as well. And so I think for us, making sure that every single step of the process reflected transparency in who we were. If you read our job descriptions, they're pretty unique. We started listing our salary ranges for all positions a couple of years ago because we thought pay transparency was really important to pay equity.
Yeah.
And so, again, really making sure people understood DEI is a critical component of who we are. Our core values are in our job descriptions. They're reiterated through that interview process. And that carried into how we were hiring for executives. And so for us, our interview process for regular staff members is long. It's even longer for executives. And so they spend a ton of time with leadership. They spend time with the board. They spend a ton of time with me and the rest of the executives. And they also get to meet with people on their team. So we really try to make sure people understand kind of what they're getting into with our company culture when they join. And so we want people to come in and shake things up. That's why we bring in people from the outside. We've also had a lot of internal people promoted into our executive team recently.
Right.
But we still want them to understand this is who SnagAJob is in our DNA, and setting that expectation right off the bat that we expect you to be collaborative. You're going to have to make decisions that are best for the business, not best for your pocketbook. You're going to have to speak in a way to your team that really is transparent, but then also is motivating. How do you balance that? How do you push people to try new things? And if they don't work, you celebrate that, you learn from it, and you move on. And so really making sure we're sussing that out as part of that interview process, that makes onboarding that much easier, because we don't
You've
have
already
to
done
kind of
it.
set the tone. Yeah, we don't have to set the
Right.
tone for company culture because they've already gotten that. It's just a matter of, the in the weeds tactical things that they've got to get up to speed on about the business versus what kind of company am I stepping into?
It almost seems too obvious now that you've said it. Right? Of course, that's what you should be doing, right? You're not just hiring for a competency. And I've seen people talk about even hiring, putting more emphasis on the capacity to align with or add to the culture in the right way. And that way, there's no harm, no foul if it doesn't work. And so it's making it very apparent. And that is really critical for leaders as much as anybody, even more. And so I think that's a really amazing way to think about that. Very cool. The other thing that I like to learn from, we've talked about some of your failures, not failures, but some of the challenging moments. And I like to ask about stories where culture, you have tried something and culture didn't work, or it did work and there was a big win, and what we can learn from it. Do you have a story or two on either side of the spectrum of either we went big on this, it didn't work, this is what I learned, I would do it this way, or we, leaned into this, did some experimentation, it's now core to what we do? I don't know, something in that realm.
Yeah, I think going back to one of the things that has worked, that revamped interview process has really been a game changer for us. It seems so simple, but setting that expectation at the very beginning of what people are in for when they join SnagAJob is really important. And it's been a huge game changer for us. Adding our employee resource groups to that interview process and allowing people to kind of pick if they want to meet with any of them, again, sets that tone of this is inclusion, something that matters to us. We want you to learn from people who are living it, of how it feels to work at SnagAJob. And I think because we've been able to lean into that when we've been hiring remotely. We've been able to bring people on that we never would have been able to hire before, because we have a value prop around company culture that's not just around, hey, if you come here, you get to work on this cool thing, you're going to get a fair salary. You're also going to get to work with these amazing people that you've met through the process. And guess what? They're not just faking it for the interview. They're like this in real life. And so I think for us, going all the way back to even how we talk about ourselves, and then all the way to how we make those decisions, has been just a huge differentiator for us. I was thinking a little bit about some things that maybe haven't always gone so well. And I remember probably the first time we really tried to kick off some DEI initiatives was 2016 or 2017. It was at a company kickoff. We'd been looking at some internal data around kind of demographics, and realized we had some work to do to better reflect the composition of the workforce that we were trying to hire. And I stood up in front of the company at our company kickoff, and I talked about this, and I was like, look at these numbers. These like make me want to puke. And that's actually what I said. I would not recommend doing that.
Not recommend.
Yeah, don't recommend telling your team that data makes you want to puke. But I didn't really dive into the why this matters. Why is this something we should be thinking about? It was purely based on the optics of like how things look. And so a lot of people were like, wait a minute, like I am not understanding this. Like, why is this matter? Why should we be focusing attention on this? And so our initial efforts were pretty slow to get started, and then they just sort of stalled because we hadn't done a good job. I specifically hadn't done a good job of saying, like, we need to take a step back and make sure that we are reflective of the people that we're representing as a business, that we're reflective of the people that we want to hire. Here's how companies perform when it comes to this. And so on paper, it feels like, of course, this is something we should be doing. But in reality, we needed to do a better job of explaining, like, this is why this matters to us in particular as a business.
Right. So, and I've listened to a few people talking now that are essentially discussing or criticizing or reflecting that, hey, everybody in 2020 after George Floyd, there was this national wave of, we're going to commit to do this, but now you see all this fall off, particularly in tension with layoffs.
Yeah.
And so some of those people first in, first out, or last in, first out, and some of those folks are the ones to go. And so I think what you're talking about is also indicative of the staying power, right? You told a story of how there's a fall off because what was my why? Why did I care? Because I have all this other things I have to put my energy towards. And so if you're like, hey, if you're describing why specifically for us, not just it's a good idea for the world if we do this, which it is, that's fine. It's shown that it improves bottom line and all that stuff, but making it personal and connecting is really, really compelling.
Yeah, and we've seen it, since we have since revamped our initiatives. We've made our ERG leaders paid positions in the company. We continue to use those for connection, especially through COVID, making sure people had a group that they could talk to just if something was on their mind. We continue to have them as part of our interview process now. We continue to leverage them for a lot of connection in this space. And again, on our most recent engagement survey, when we had a question around, I feel like I belong at SnagAJob, it was almost 90% favorability.
And does everybody join an ERG? What's the percentage of folks that are joining employee resource groups?
That's a good question.
You can say I don't know, and we'll put the answer in the show notes.
Yeah, I don't know. Our ERGs are open to everyone, whether they identify as a member of that group or they are interested in being an ally to that group. We have some programs that are sometimes designed for members of that group specifically. All of our ERGs have executive sponsors, though, to make sure that they're able to have an advocate on our executive team who can help them get resources or find external speakers or brainstorm new ideas about approaching things. I would say, gosh, I don't know. All of our ERGs are pretty heavily utilized anytime. We've got a pretty tight-knit group here. So I think if a group is hosting something, I don't know exactly the participation, but they're always really well attended.
Are there any, this is my kind of wrap up kind of question or starting to land the plane here, which is, future initiatives, ERG related or not? I mean, I've been talking a lot about ERGs as an opportunity to rebuild that culture debt that many organizations have incurred, right? Because they haven't invested in
Yeah.
culture. ERGs is a great way to, build and strengthen relationships, trust, psychological safety. It sounds like you're kind of, you all are, have really got your ERGs working in a good, really powerful way. Are there any other evolutions of ERG? And expanding that question, what is the next culture, people thing that you are thinking about, aspire to work on in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I would say, as far as our ERGs go, this is a piece of advice maybe that I would give instead. I think it was a game changer for us when we made those paid positions. And it's not a full-time position. Instead, what we did was figure out about how many hours a month we thought someone would need to be in this role, and then devised a salary based on that. But if we are asking these functions to add business value, we need to pay them to add that business value. We cannot expect people to give this labor for free. And I think that lends a lot of credibility to the work that we're asking them to do. So that might be one piece of advice I would give for folks if they're
I
looking to
love that.
truly make their ERGs like have a business impact. And I think for us going into this year, we saw a ton last year just when we think about like reproductive care access and how we could make sure we are showing up for our employees, but also like thinking about ways we can impact our hourly workers. Coming up, it's really much more around like how do we continue to build connection and give people a space without contributing to burnout, because that burnout thing is something we're keeping a close eye on right now. We have a much leaner team than we did at this time last year.
Right.
We are, really trying to focus on prioritization and making sure we're doing the most important actions, but we still have a finite number of people doing these things. So how are we making sure we're revamping our meeting strategy and our communication strategy to adapt to where people are at right now? So that's a big thing for us. And then
Mm.
really thinking about career development in a smaller organization. Sometimes people feel like they don't have as much opportunity to grow as in a bigger organization. So how are we continuing to lean into development plans and leadership development programs, and even utilizing stay interviews to help with sort of like an individualized career coaching sort of path? So those are all things that we are working on literally right now to roll
Mm.
out over the next 6 months. So hopefully we can continue this conversation again after those, and we can give you an update on how it's
Yes,
worked.
I would love it. Candace Nicolls, SVP of SnagAJob. You can learn more about the amazing business that she's helped building, SnagAJob.com. It is so wonderful to see you. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and wisdom. And yes, I'd love to have you back. We will reconnect after you've launched those, and we'll talk about what worked and what didn't and what we can learn from it. Thank you, Candace.
Thank you so much for having me.